Now you're known as the world's biggest expert on tocophobia. How did that happen? That's not kind of how you set out in this
No,
world.
I think that's completely by accident. Actually, I wouldn't, there's no way I would have set out to be this, but I think it's through the work that I've been doing for the last, well, more than a decade now in working in helping women to heal from their tocophobia. So I know it intimately. And one of the reasons I know it intimately is because I had it and had to wrestle with it myself. So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
what makes me an expert in tocophobia.
Yeah. So then obviously what I've got to ask you is how did it manifest with you? What did you experience? What was it? And how did you know that it was tocophobia?
Well, when I first realized, and I guess I didn't realize I had it, when I first experienced it, I didn't know that this is what I was experiencing. So the first experience that's really relevant to all of this is when I found out I was pregnant, and the shock and the terror and the all-consuming darkness that came over me out of nowhere was really caught me by surprise. Like it bowled me over in such a way that I was like, what the hell? Like, what the hell? And so I was grappling with a lot of emotions. So I think the doctor maybe suggested that I should have a pregnancy test. I don't know. There was something like the doctor suggested I should do this because I was complaining about achy boobs and I'd lost my mother to breast cancer. So I was like, I've got cancer. And she's like, have you done a pregnancy test? And that had not even been on my radar.
Right.
So that is, I'm picture this.
Yeah.
I'm 36 and I'm in a long-term relationship with somebody and we've been together for 8 years. And I don't know that one of the signs of pregnancy is achy boobs. Um, Also, yeah, so that kind of tells you a lot, right? There's a lot of like I wasn't even taking in any information, I wasn't reading into it, but I did on some level kind of want to be a mum, but I'd not done any information gathering around any of that. So here I am, pregnancy test confirms I'm pregnant, and I just want the whole world to swallow me up. And I must have stayed in that dark place for a good few days, and then I didn't know my period last date, which they need to give you your due date. So I had to go to the neonatal unit so they could start doing scans and all of that. So it was going in and out every few days. They were really trying to see the level of growth and all of that to try and pin a date down. And it was during that that I found out that I lost the baby. And so when that happened, that was again, a very conflicted experience because at that point I'd started to get to grips with the fact that I was pregnant and started to
Yeah.
kind of accept that that was my situation. And so I felt an incredible sense of loss at that moment. But that didn't last very long at all because soon behind that was this huge sense of relief. And I like, and then that's when it really hit me. I was like, what on earth is what's going on here? How you're a woman and you're experiencing relief at experiencing a miscarriage. Like, what is that about? You are
Mm.
messed up. And I was messed up and I considered myself to be a right hot mess at that point because my mum had not long died to cancer. So I think I was in about 1 or 2 years of that. And that happened very suddenly. So that was a very traumatic loss. From like finding out to losing her was like 5 weeks. So that was
Oh,
I
wow.
took that really, I was
Yeah.
still suffering from that in a really big way. And of course I had I'd not really done any healing of any note, really. So I was an anxious mess, bouts of anxiety, bouts of depression, suffering with a lot of grief. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, I was a hot mess in that sense. And so when I was experiencing this relief at a miscarriage, I just thought it was something to do with all of that, right? I didn't know
Right.
that there
Yeah.
was something else that may explain it. And so because I didn't know what I was experiencing really, I just thought, well, I'll go and try and sort my anxiety out. That seems like a good place to start. And so that's what I did. And I managed to kind of make reasonable inroads, but not massive until I fell pregnant again. And I'd made enough of an impact so that when I fell pregnant again a year later, I didn't have that same all-consuming darkness that came over me. This time I was like, okay, okay, like that, kind of like, okay, put yourself together. You can do this. Like,
Go
okay,
for
this
it.
isn't great,
Yeah.
but you can do it. Like, you can get through it.
Yeah.
Which is a very different, very different place to swallow me whole, take me away from this. I want to hide and not come out.
Yeah.
That was where I felt before. Whereas this time I was like, okay, not ideal, but got to get through it. And okay, we've decided now that this is what we want. And so, right, okay, deep breath, let's go. And so in that year that happened, like, we had the baby conversation. So we'd never had the baby conversation. So when I was part of my struggles when I first found out I was pregnant, was like, I'm going to be a single mum, which is what my mother was. And so I was like, I'm going to have to raise, I don't even know if he wants kids. Like, can you imagine being in an 8-year relationship at 36 and not knowing if he wants kids?
Yeah.
This is tokophobia, right? I
Yeah.
couldn't have any of those conversations. So now we'd had those conversations. And yes, we did want children. So now I was coming into this with okay, we're a team, like we're doing this, we both want this, I want this, let's go kind of thing. But that still didn't take away the fear that I was experiencing around specifically the birth. And this time I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. The only way I'm going to be able to do this is a C-section, and I'm going to need all the drugs in the world so that I can be knocked out cold. I don't want to be conscious. I don't want to be awake. I just want you to, then you just need to come in, take the baby out, and then show it to me afterwards. Like, I don't want to be involved in any of that process, which to anybody that knows anything about pregnancy, birth, and everything is you can't do it like that. If you have a C-section, you've got to be awake.
Yeah. You've got to be
You need
conscious.
to
Yeah.
be there, like,
Mm.
So yeah, so I was like, okay, so even the only way that I could see getting through this was that version. And I was like, that's not even actually possible. So what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And so that's when I started searching for answers during this would have been mid of my first trimester, trying to like
Right.
search.
And is that when you discovered the word tokophobia? Is
No,
that when you found out? No. So,
no. So I went to the whole of my pregnancy and my birth. I only discovered the word tokophobia after I gave birth.
right.
So the whole
Yeah.
of that time, I didn't know that I was suffering with a thing that
Mm.
had a name.
Mm.
And so when I was, and because I didn't really know, and again, because I didn't like babies or children or want to be around any conversations around pregnancy or birth, which I didn't realize was tokophobia. I didn't really have a lot of friends that were into babies or had kids because there was like,
Mm.
I kind of pulled myself away.
Yeah.
And so now I wasn't really able to talk about how I was feeling with anybody that might have maybe understanding or that I could talk to around this. So it's very much I was like wrestling with this on my own to that set in that sense. And of course I talked about things with my partner, but he's a guy, like, like whatever, he
Yeah.
just wants to be there to support. It's not the same, is it?
No.
So yeah, I didn't know it was a thing, and I just thought it was me, a continuation of my anxiety from before. And whenever I Googled it or looked into it, it was, all I came across was hypnobirthing and that kind of thing. And so that's what I was trying. I was reading books on that. I was listening to hypnobirthing tracks. I was pursuing that as the way to help me. And every time I tried that, it just wasn't having any impact. What was useful around that was learning a little bit more about birth, but I really struggled with that too, because every time I discovered too much, I couldn't handle
Mm.
information about birth.
Mm.
And so I felt a little bit lost, if I'm honest, and struggling, like clutching at straws because nothing seemed to work. And so I got to the point I was like, I'm going to have to sort this out myself.
Mm.
And so at the time, I was a business coach that had started incorporating more mindset and mind work into my work because I realized that how important the mind is in achieving success. So I'd started learning a lot of those things, like neurolinguistic programming, for example, thought field therapy. People might know there's this TFT, NLP. And so I was like, well, I can sort this out. And so I started trying to find ways of dealing with my fear myself. And the time came when I was going for my first midwife appointment. And, you know, the first one you have, they get all the notes out, they want to know all the bits, all the details. And it's very much a form filling exercise, really. But I really needed it to be a little bit more than that. I needed somebody there to kind of like support me emotionally. Because I was,
Reassure you. Yeah.
yeah, and she had no bedside manner whatsoever.
Dear.
Which is terrible, really, because, you know, you think
Yeah.
about what an emotional state women are at that point. You really need somebody that's a little bit more sensitive than what I was experiencing at that time. And at one point she said, "Oh, it's all right. Once you get through all this, I'll get you. You will get all. We'll get the injections done." And it was like, "Whoa, what did you just say? Injections?" Now,
Yeah.
I had a phobia of needles and injections. I was the kind of person that would never leave a needle injection appointment conscious. I was always carried out because I would always
Dear.
faint. And I've got memories of my grandmother in France, because I'm half French, hanging me upside down by my ankles and the doctors waiting for me and feeding me croissant to bring me around again, because I would always faint at the sight of a needle or injection. So now the midwife's telling me I've got all these injections coming up, and at this point I just like glaze. I'm just, my eyes just sort of, you know when you know that something's coming like that, suddenly
Yeah.
my face changes, like, and now I wasn't paying attention to what was going on at all, because I was just now panicking about these injections that she hadn't told me about in advance. You know, if you have a phobia of
Right.
injections, you need to know that kind of stuff in advance. You can't just have that landed on you,
Yeah.
because you need to kind of psych yourself up. And I wasn't able to do that. So now I wasn't really paying attention. She kind of clocked it a little bit, and she said, "Oh, so you scared of needles then?" I was like, yeah,
Just a bit.
yeah. And she said, "Oh, don't worry. You just sit outside while I get all the needles ready." And I was like, "All the
Oh,
needles ready? Are you kidding
how
me?"
many? How
Yeah, like,
many?
are you trying to make me feel better with this? So so she put me in the corridor. So now I'm in on my own in the corridor, like absolutely bricking it, because she's getting all the needles ready.
Yeah.
And it was that point that I decided I was going to try something that I wanted to work on to use to clear my fears. And so I remember pointing, like I imagined that the technique was this character floating above me, and I was like, right, okay, this is your chance, show me what you've got, you know. And so I tried it, and then she called me back. I didn't have very long. I'd had less than 5 minutes. She called me back in, and she went, "Oh, so you're scared then of needles?" And I was like, "No." And I was like, "Who said that? Did I say that?" Because it was such an instant response.
Yeah.
She goes, "Oh, how did you get rid of it?" I said, "I used to." She goes, "How did you get rid of it?" I was like, "Oh." And I'm still processing the fact that I've just managed to like I've just said this nuance that I've never said before. So I was a bit in, well, shock, maybe is a good
Yeah. Yeah.
time. So we went ahead and she got the needles out, and I was, I put my arm on the table. I handed it over like you do, you just put your hand out. And this is all fine. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, oh my God, oh, the needle's going in. Oh my God, I'm fine. And yeah, and I was fine the whole time. And just sitting there thinking, holy, like, oh my God, this has never, ever
Yeah.
happened to me. Wow. And I came out of there thinking, oh my God, like that is a phobia that I've had all my life for as long as I can remember. And I've just managed to get rid of that in less
Mm.
than 5 minutes, sitting on a chair in a hospital corridor. Right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna use that and do every single fear that I'm now facing around what I'm feeling around having this baby. And so I got home and I wrote everything down that I was feeling, all my fears, everything that I was terrified of. I mean, it's mainly pain and then more pain and then pain again. But there were
Yeah.
other things in there, right? Like the sense of vulnerability and whether or not I was going to be able to cope, and whether, like, how was I going to be able to, like, the feeling of not being in control of this whole thing that was ahead of me, not knowing how it was going to go. There's so much there that I realized the minute I kind of started asking myself, what are you scared of? It just loads came out.
Yeah.
And I must have had an A4 notepad with one or two, like easily 1.5 columns, maybe two full columns of things that I'd written down. And so at that point, I was clearing stuff all the time to just work through my list. And as I was doing it, I was just finding better ways of tweaking and figuring out what I was doing to make it easier for me. And so, yeah, so it was just an experiment, basically. And I realized that it'd been working, because then in month 7, I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna have a home birth. Yeah, I'm gonna
So
I'm
you
gonna
went from
ditch that.
wanting everything and a C-section to having a home birth
Yeah,
without
so I was
drugs,
like,
probably.
yeah, I'm gonna ditch that. Like, I'm gonna get my plan. I'm gonna have a home birth. So then I
Yeah.
went to a hypnobirthing course, which I thought was incredible. And there's no way I could have done that before, because I remember at some point early on in the pregnancy, I bought a book on planning your pregnancy, and it's the kind of book where you can go through week by week, and you know the baby's a blueberry and it becomes a grape and then it becomes a watermelon
Yes. So
and all of
yeah,
that, you know,
I've
week by
seen
week.
those. Yeah.
And there's a certain section of the book, it's all very anatomical, and you see the cross section of a uterus and a womb and the birth canal, and I remember seeing that diagram and feeling a panic attack coming up. I was hyperventilating and
Mm.
I can't look at this. And I just had to slam the book shut. And I put that book away and I didn't open that book until well after the hypnobirthing course, because I couldn't even engage with any kind of, yeah, that I was like, I can't even look at that book. That book's too much. So I couldn't really learn about birth until after that hypnobirthing course. And then I
Mm.
was like, oh, now I'm okay learning about this, but I just wasn't in that mental state before then to even learn anything about it. I needed to kind of get those fears out the way. And so once I'd set my sights on this home birth, um, everything changed. Like I knew I was free of my fear, because I was starting to get excited. I thought, oh, baby shower. Yes, I'm up for a baby shower. Like I started engaging with all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I was in denial. Yeah, I wasn't even prepared for any of that before that point. And I remember the day the due date came and went, of course. And then then I think about there was a couple of days later than the due date, and then my waters broke. And in that moment when my waters broke, I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm going to meet my baby. And I was so excited at that point. And even just thinking about that now, I feel really emotional because it was such a wonderful moment. And I know if I hadn't cleared my fears, that moment could have been absolutely terrifying for me.
You'd have been terrified. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way. I mean, there's no way I would have gone for a
Yeah.
home birth. I would have been, there's no way. There's no way that trajectory would have gone that way. And so, yeah, and I had an incredible home, but it was an incredible experience. But my fears were still like I hadn't cleared all of them. And I told my midwives, I said, look, I'm going to be doing this fear clearance stuff during labor. So if you see me doing this stuff, you just got to leave me alone. I'm doing my own thing. So I told them what I was up to, and I was clearing throughout labor because new stuff kept coming up, and
Mm.
even at the point where baby was coming out, and they had to call the ambulance because they're like, baby's not coming out, baby's a bit stuck. We probably need to get the ambulance here to take you in. Might need to go into hospital. And I remember thinking, there is no way I'm going to hospital. Like, no way. Yeah, I'm having my baby here. And so I have to go inward again and go, right, what is it that you're holding back from here? And I'd already cleared my fear of pain.
Right.
But what I hadn't cleared was my fear of pain of the ring of fire, which is a quite specific fear where the
Yeah.
baby's head's coming out and it's all
Mm.
very.
Yeah.
And so I cleared that in between contractions and she came straight out and I had my baby at home. Um,
Wow.
and so yeah, and that was an incredible fearless birth. Yeah, fearless because every time it came up, I just dealt with it, just cleared it, cleared it, cleared it. And so I came out of that experience and I still didn't know that what I had was tocophobia. But it was only, I think, about 6 months later that I learned the term because I was chatting quite randomly with a journalist at my business club. And she was telling me that was her experience and she was writing a piece on it. And I
Ah,
was like,
okay.
oh, well, I had this. And so that's when I first learned that this had a name. But, I
Mm.
didn't really do anything with that information at that point. I just went back to being a business coach until baby number 2 came along. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was my tocophobia experience. But those fears, once I cleared them, they were gone. And by the time baby number 2 came round, I was in the position where I was like, oh, well, how do I feel about birth now?
Mm.
Was I did what I do work, or was it just like happenstance that I happened to like? A lot of women give birth all the time and it's fine. maybe all of that was a
Well, not
total
all the
waste
time
of time.
necessarily, but
No, but there are a lot of women that are able to just
yeah,
kind of go along and birth
yeah,
their babies
yeah,
without being knocked out with all the drugs. Like that's
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah.
that's like, so maybe all of that stuff I did was just, it was a total waste of time, and it would have all been fine in the end anyway, because that's what they say. It's
Mm.
like, you're going to be fine.
They do say that, don't they? They just say, oh, it'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine when the time comes.
Exactly. So maybe that was me, right? Maybe
Yeah,
I just, maybe that was my journey. Maybe that's what happened to me. And maybe all that stuff I did was nothing. Yeah, it was a waste of time, and it didn't do anything. So I needed another pregnancy or another birth to kind of test myself, if you like. Not that that was a
yeah.
reason for the
That
second.
wasn't why you had your second
No,
child.
no, no. It's just suddenly baby number two rolled around. I was like, oh, how do I feel now about being pregnant? How do
Yeah.
I feel? Where am I now on all those things I was worried about before? And I was like, oh, I'm still fine with all of that. But this time around, I was an older mum. I was a geriatric. And so I had all these kind of very heavy fear-based messages that were coming in
Mm.
from medical staff and
Yeah.
professionals. And I was consultant led in the UK rather than midwife led, because I was a high risk category, being as old as I was, which was basically 2 weeks. The due date was meant I was 2 weeks over 40 for the due date. So really quite old.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah. So this time I had new fears because it was a very different experience.
Yes, of course.
So I was able to kind of redo what I was like, test what I did before and apply it in different ways, and see, okay, well, does it work on this, and does it work on this and that? And I was able to be a lot more mindful and critical of what I was doing, and seeing, oh, that is working. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, right. And seeing that what I did worked, and what I was doing was a thing, and actually I could refine it. And so that was a really good pregnancy for me in terms of my method, because I was able to kind of tweak it, test it, refine it,
Yeah.
and all of that. And for me, all I really wanted was to be able to repeat the birth that I had the first time, because it was so
Mm.
incredible. And that was like, that's all I want. I just want to repeat what I did the first time, because yeah. And I never imagined that I could exceed it and have something even more, like a really powerfully positive, euphoric
Mm.
spiritual experience. And that's exactly what the second one was like.
And
Um,
that's what people say birth should be. I mean, that
right.
ideally, it
Yeah.
can be like that. Yeah.
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 And so, and it's only after that experience, and I don't know what happened. Something, maybe midwives talked, I don't know. But 2, 3 weeks into my newborn's life, I start receiving emails from women
Mm.
asking me how I did it. And I don't know these women. And I'm like, how did you get my email address? Where did you hear this? And I still don't know how they got tracked me down. But I started getting emails from women saying, how did you get rid of your fears and have this experience like this twice? And so I started emailing to let them know what I've been doing. Um, and these were quite long emails, because I had to kind of like break down my fears. I'd really given a lot of time to thinking about what was making me scared.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of peel that back. Now, because I'd trained as a coach, and I'd been training in a lot of this, mindset, and really digging into human behavior, I couldn't assume that everybody had done that kind of work. So I really needed these
Exactly.
emails to kind of explain that a little bit. And then, of course, there was the method that I was using. So these emails were quite long, really. And I was like breastfeeding and tired, and all the rest of it. And I remember thinking, after a few emails like this, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I just need to keep what I'm writing. If I get another one of these, I'm just going to write a book. And then that's what I did. And so by the time my daughter was 3 months, I had a book, a draft book of 108,000 words. And I was like, what are you going to do with this?
Fantastic.
What
It's
are you
just
doing with that?
fantastic.
Like, I was a
Yeah.
business coach. Most of my clients were men, and this was not in line with any of my work. And I just
Yeah.
written a book for women facing pregnancy and birth fears. And I was like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. This is like, what an indulgence. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
But so
Uh,
not an indulgence. But yeah.
no. And so, and these women were still emailing me, and they wanted answers, because I said, oh, I've got this book. I'll let you have the book. But of course, like naively, like it takes quite a bit to publish a book. You can't just write it and publish it. You can,
Exactly.
but like 108,000 words needs a bit of editing and tidying up and all the rest of it. So I couldn't just get it out there. so I decided to start sharing it very quickly through a podcast. So I got a podcast up and running in under a week called the Fear Free Childbirth Podcast, and just started sharing all the initial ideas in the book as
Yeah.
episodes, just to get it out there, because that was really quick and I could just share it very quickly. And that is the beginning of my work in all of this. And I never for 1 minute, like for me, that podcast was a little maternity project. And I thought, well, I'll just get a few episodes up, share this, and I'll get back to my head trash
Get
business,
back to your
my
work. Get
business
back to
coaching,
your proper
get back
work.
to my work with
Yeah.
these male CEOs over here that need my work in their
Hmm.
businesses. You know, I'll do that, and then and they don't need to know about this podcast because they're never going to see it. Like it's just this little side project.
Yeah.
And then the
Little did you
podcast
know.
went nuts, and I was like,
Yeah.
holy moly, I need to take this more seriously. This is the thing. I didn't realize how many women were
Oh,
so scared of birth. I thought when I was going through it that it was just me being a weirdo, because I thought that women liked pregnancy and wanted to be pregnant and wanted to have babies, and that
well, we're
me not
told that.
wanting that was me
Yeah.
being weird.
We're told that. That is what we're told we're, here to do.
Yeah.
Have babies. We'll enjoy having babies. We enjoy being mothers. I mean, and if you deviate from that in the slightest, you feel that you're odd. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I thought that it was just me, and maybe, and I realized obviously not just me, but I thought that I was an absolute minority,
Yeah.
and that nobody would resonate or understand. And I didn't really I didn't know anybody that felt the way that I did. And so yeah, so when the podcast started getting insane downloads,
Mm.
it was I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like this is a thing that, and women were kind of tracking me down and like coming forward saying, oh my goodness, it's just so good to hear somebody else that's going through this. And it was almost like they'd found somebody else that felt just like them or was
Yeah.
resonating with how they were feeling. And I did not for 1 minute anticipate where this would go and where
No.
this has led to me today at all.
No, but it's fantastic that it has led you to this place. And one of the things that, I mean, I think a lot of women will resonate with what you're talking about in terms of the fear when they find out that they're pregnant, even but beforehand, not even realizing that you have that fear because it's not something that's talked about
Yeah,
until now.
yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about with you, though, is looking back before you knew that tocophobia was a thing. Can you see anywhere in your life where that fear of birthing, giving birth, might have affected other areas of your life?
Well, looking back, I can see it really clearly.
Yeah.
And so when I think about my commitment to my career, I'm going to be a career, like, you know, I'm going to put my career first, independent woman, all of that kind of thing. And that's almost, that's avoiding the alternative, which is stay at home mum, have babies, all of that. I was like, there is no way I'm going to be a stay, like, no, that's not me. And yeah, like that I think there's a bit of tocophobia showing up
Yeah.
there. And then of course there's
Yeah.
a lot to be said for having a career that you love, work that you love, and I love the work that I do. So it's you know, and but I would have loved the opportunity to also consider being a stay-at-home mum, whereas because it was
Yeah.
never ever anywhere on my radar, it was never anything I desired or wanted. Yeah, and now I look back, I think, oh, that would have been so great to actually want that and plan for that and choose that rather than kind of deny it and pretend I didn't want it. But also another huge part is sex. And I remember having a lot of fear around sex throughout the
Oh,
whole of
right.
my
Yeah.
yeah, from when I started being sexually active. And even there were many times where I'd just cry and it would make no sense. Like I'd be like, why am I crying? What is going on? And yeah, I'd get in a right old mess and it never made any sense. And I didn't know what on earth was going on. And that's because it was just it was getting too close for comfort. Like this could
Oh,
lead to pregnancy, but I didn't realize that was what was going on,
no,
you know?
no. It's all
Um,
going on in the subconscious. Yeah.
yeah. And it was just getting too close to, and I know a lot of the women I work with, they can't have sex because it is so difficult and it leads to the potential of pregnancy and birth. But they're already in the awareness that they are scared of pregnancy and birth, whereas I hadn't figured that out. So I was kind of in the dark, really, with
Yeah.
that. Didn't make
Well,
sense to me.
exactly. And that's what I was trying to get at, because a lot of women who have tocophobia won't have any clue that they
Yeah,
have any of these fears at all. It's just natural to them in a way, although other people might think that they're odd, or they might think other people think they're odd.
yeah,
But for them, it's just natural. It's
yeah,
just the way they are.
yeah. And the other thing is I didn't like kids or babies. So if anybody had a baby and they're like, oh, yeah, and I'm like, not interested, not cute. No, don't pass it to me. I really don't care that you've had a baby, and I don't want to look at it, don't want to hold it, not interested in what it's doing, any of it, just
Yeah.
not interested.
And
And that
that
was
doesn't
something,
go down very well with mothers.
so you kind of like, that's why I didn't want to hang around with maids that had babies, because I
Yeah.
just wasn't like that. Mums get offended with a new baby,
Yeah.
they want to
They
hold them
do.
and all of that. So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm not going to put myself in those situations. But there was a situation at work where a lady brought in her twins, and everybody was cooing around the twins at work. And I couldn't kind of get away because it was like near my desk. So we were just standing around, just like, oh, hi, all of that. And she was
Yeah.
a colleague, so I, just being polite. But then one of them vomited on her shoulder, so she passed one to me. And I was absolutely horrified. I mean, I think I held it for all of a second before I passed it straight on to like the head of supply chain, who was a guy who was like, why are you giving it to me? I was like,
Yeah.
well,
Don't.
I don't want it. And I had to run out the office and go to the toilet. And I got to the toilet and started crying. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
what happened there? And I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't know why
No,
I couldn't hold the
exactly.
baby. Like, what is that
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. And you can't make sense of it. You
No,
don't know why that is happening to you.
no. And I
And
didn't, yeah.
yeah, and I was going to say, because the word tocophobia hasn't been bandied around at all, hardly. Certainly wasn't when I was of childbearing age. You don't even know that there is such a thing to relate to the way that you're behaving. So it's, yeah,
Yeah.
it's baffling.
It is baffling. And when I think back now to other experiences I had, I don't, I wonder whether or not, like, when I was with my partner for 8 years and we never talked about having babies or planning for a family or committing to each other, like that's maybe he must have said stuff to kind of test the territory or test the subject, and thought, oh, that's clearly not a thing with her, so I'll just walk and I'll just head over here.
Yeah,
He must have had
yeah,
those kind of like, but that would have just not, like, it's like I had a force field around that subject, and he must have just tried and it bounced straight off, and he's like, all right, okay. And I remember hearing him thinking, he always said, oh, I'm going to be the uncle that brings gifts from foreign countries for like the kids, like, as in, I'm not going to be a dad kind of thing. And I remember thinking,
yeah.
well, okay, that's lucky, because like,
Because you don't,
brilliant.
yeah, you don't want to go there. Mm.
Even though a part of me did want to be a mother, there was a
Yeah,
maternal thing but I couldn't kind of see the link between where I was now and me being a mother. There was like this big gaping hole.
yeah,
And the way that I describe this when I'm working with my clients is that it's like I'm on this side of the river and there's this rapids, like really this river full of crocodiles and whatever else is going on here. And motherhood's on the other side. And I just cannot see how I am ever going to get across that. And
yeah,
it's just a lovely idea that, wouldn't it be great to be over there? But as it happens, I'm over here and I can't see how to get across this. And so, yeah, I never could draw the link. And so the link is having conversations about, when are we going to have kids? Are we going to have like, and so this then leads into the conversations of, well, did you want to be, if we have kids, do you want to stay at home? Who's going to earn the money? How are we going to organize finances? None of that happened. So when I fell pregnant and I'm a business owner and he's a business owner, we just go rolling into like parenthood as business owners. When I had a perfectly good job not that long before, and I could have had maternity leave and been a stay-at-home mum, like,
mm.
if I was a little bit, if I knew what was going on, like, we could have entered parenthood in a very different way, rather than kind of on the back foot tumbling through it backwards, which is how I
Mm.
feel we went through it.
Mm.
And I wish I could have planned it and done it differently and also been a mum sooner. I was an older mum. I would have loved to have kids much sooner. I love being a mother. And yeah, and I just can't believe, if I'd known about tocophobia, how I could have, well, there's no point going down that route, but I'm absolutely sure that it would have changed my trajectory of my life if I'd not had it in loads of ways.
No doubt, I think. No doubting
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And so now that's why you're so committed to the work that you're doing now around
yeah,
tocophobia. It's
yeah,
because you know how much it can really change women's lives, not just women's lives, men's
yeah.
lives as well.
No, I know the whole for families, for yeah, and that actually quite emotional thing about that. Think about that. Well, how my life could have been different if I'd had, if I did know about it, and the clues are there. That's what's so
Mm,
frustrating, is that I'm clients at the moment that I'm working with are like, and I'm just trying to, getting an understanding of how what they're experiencing. They're like, oh, pap smears, can't
mm,
do pap smears, and it's like, yeah, well, why isn't every pap smear nurse asking questions? Like the clues are
mm,
there. And
mhm.
I can imagine that I would say 99% of women don't like pap smears, but I would imagine that those with tocophobia react quite differently to maybe those that don't have it. So there are some
Yeah.
really, I think that now with what I know, there are some big clues, right? And
Yeah.
it just seems incredible that all the healthcare professionals that are involved with women across the whole of their lives, from when they start, when they teenage and upwards, that it's missed. And it just, part of me is really angry about that, because women deserve better than this, So I'm getting emotional now. Like,
I know.
what's going on? Sorry,
I
I'm
know.
getting emotional.
No, you are getting emotional, and I understand it quite rightly, because we've done such a disservice
Yeah,
health wise in so many ways, and this is one of them.
yeah.
This is
No, I
one
know.
of them.
So we've got to like get the word out for women
Yeah,
so that they get the opportunity to
I'm
speak.
getting emotional now.
Sorry.
We're
No, I know.
both, we're,
It is. It's just so like, why didn't anybody tell me?
yeah,
Yeah, nobody knows about it. This is what's so frustrating, is like nobody told me. I couldn't do anything about it. There wasn't, even if I'd known about it, there isn't, so I just have to dab my eyes. There's
mm,
no like solution for it. The women I work with now, they just get told to get a C-section.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
not a solution. They've still got 9 months of pregnancy to go through,
yeah, yeah.
So, and I know we're going to talk a lot about this later in the podcast, but it
Hmm.
just, this is why I'm doing this now, and this is why we've come together, because
Yeah,
we've just got to get the word out.
yeah,
And so even though and this is why I'm an accidental expert, because I didn't set out to do this, it just,
yeah.
there's way it happened, and I've figured out a way to heal it, and now I've figured out a way to heal it really quickly. And I have many times put this work down and gone back to my roots of business and marketing and
You've been
coaching.
resisting it.
I've
You've
been
been
resisting
resisting.
it a lot and trying to put it down, like, no, 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 I'm going to go back over here now. And then I pull me back in again. I'm like, okay. And it really, it's when I think it's in the last few months or so, but just before we decided to do this podcast, where I have a questionnaire that I ask people when they start working with me, why is it, do you want to work with me? And they're like, well, you're the world expert in tocophobia. And I had that like 3 times running. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I am actually. I really should start maybe owning
Yeah.
that and doing something about it, because no one else is, right? No one else is. These women are still coming to me. I had a lady come to me from Eastern Europe for work, and she went to see her perinatal psychologist, who told her that she would need to see her. It would take approximately 3 years of treatment. And even then, there was no guarantee. And I was like thinking, oh, that made me so angry. I was like, oh my gosh, so
Yeah.
this is why we've got
Yeah.
to do this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And the way women experience tocophobia, and men do also get tocophobia, we should say, but particularly for women and women in relation to childbirth, you can experience it in so many different ways as well.
Mm,
But the thing to bear in mind is that you can deal with it, and it can be dealt with very quickly. And that's
yeah,
what you've actually managed to pull together as a way of doing that very
yeah,
quickly. And it is effective.
yeah, yeah. And I've got some clients, the typical healing time, if it's not wrapped up with things like OCD or anxiety and depression,
Mm-hmm.
it's about a month. I've
Yeah.
had some women, we've been able to get it sorted in 2 weeks. I've
Yeah.
had a lady, she had anxiety. OCD and Tokophobia, got that done in 5 weeks. Some women need longer because they've got other things going on. I mean, the healing journey is not linear. So
No,
it's not like
exactly.
we've all got our own journeys to go through. Um, and then you got the infertility part of the journey.
Mm.
It's not it's a life thing, right? It's a thing you've got to go through. But you can absolutely get it done inside a pregnancy. And so if you find out, and this is why I get women that they see their pregnancy test and they're like panic, and then they try, because like me, they realize the fear becomes apparent to them the minute they see the pregnancy test.
Yeah,
And before then, they didn't realize that they had it. And so
yeah,
suddenly they're on a clock. They're like, I haven't even got long to sort this out. And they're wrestling with these big emotions
yeah,
with not a
yeah,
lot of time. So we need something that's fast acting, because these
yeah.
women, the longer you spend like that in pregnancy, it's not good for the baby or for you or for the birth. So we've got to protect the baby at all costs. So
Exactly.
fast, effective healing is what you need for tocophobia for the best outcomes for all.
Very much so. And early on as well. We don't want to go through life with it accompanying us at every stage and affecting all kinds of different things potentially in our
Yeah,
lives. But we'll talk about that another time.
we will. Yes, we
And
will.
for now, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think so, JJ, and I can't wait for us to
Yeah.
see your
No, so
story.
thanks for telling us your story, because I think it's really important that people understand where you're coming from
Yeah,
and how you managed to get this together, and how you're helping women, and how we'll both, hopefully, through this podcast, help women understand more about it and get through it.
yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, JJ.